Will you please describe for the jury some of the cycles you had with Mr. Depp through 2012?
So in 2012, the violence was pretty, relative to what it became, pretty, slapping, backhanding. Well, it went from this eggshell kind of, you're walking on eggshells, nothing you're doing is kind of right, but you don't know what you're doing wrong. And then I was doing something wrong clearly, but it was unclear within the scope of an argument what I was defending myself against. So it would shift from a rumor he had heard that I was with a friend, or I had been photographed standing too close to a male person. That was a person I had had something with, and I was lying to him about, and it would be eggshells, accusations, and then he would explode. It started with throwing things, destroying the property, and screaming at me. I remember the screaming at me was the worst, because I kind of always felt like I had done, I had to defend myself. I had to tell him so he didn't think these things were true. And sometimes, he would shift accusations while I'm trying to dispel one accusation. He'd start another one, and nothing I could do to calm him down. It seemed like I'd walk away, and that would make it worse. I remember in my apartment in Orange, he would grab me by the hair, or he'd grab me by the arm, pull me into him, scream at me that way. He'd smash things around me, then he would smash things very close to me, and then he would just hit me. And it started with slapping, and it got to be like repetitive slaps where he'd hold me in a position and slap me multiple times in a row. Then it would be, eventually I later would either push him off of me, or I'd try to hit his hands away from me. I'd try to, not in 2012 so much. At that time, I was mostly, my defense was, I'd go some other place. Like, I don't know how to describe that. I'd focus on something else. I'd stand up, look at him, try to stand up to him that way. Later, I adopted other kind of strategies to deal with it, but at the time, in 2012, he'd have this blowout, and then he would leave, disappear, and I'd be committed to not talking to him. I'm done with this relationship. I can't take it anymore. I said that so many times. And then he'd come back, clean and sober, telling me either he had a chip. He didn't have any chips, but he would say, I've gone to meetings. I have a sober companion now. I'm doing this program. I'm reading this. I'm doing this. And he was done with drugs and alcohol for good this time. And he'd come back in my life, and with the combination of him being sober and having gone through this horrible thing where I felt like my heart ripped out of my chest, like a relationship ending is hard, I think, for anyone, but ending under that circumstance is really painful. And so when he'd come back, it would almost feel like a solution to that, and it would feel great, and we would be good again, and he'd be extra nice and extra apologetic and extra loving, and we'd be back in the good bubble, the warm glow. And eventually I'd get bored, and then I'd see him drinking again. When I started to get upset, noticing the pattern of the violence going with the drinking and drugs, then he started sneaking it. So it became less clear, and I'd have to look for clues as to what he was on. So I just knew how to react, Johnny on speed is very different from Johnny on opiates. Johnny on opiates, very different from Adderall and cocaine Johnny, which is very different from Quaaludes Johnny. But I had to get good at paying attention to the different versions of him. 2012, I was in the beginning stages of this, just learning these patterns. I was just learning that drinking kind of correlated with the violence.